So here we are. It is September 27th at 1 p.m. So it's time for the first of the fall series of CMRTO webinars, What Happens on January 1, 2019. So my name is Linda Goff, and I'm the Registrar and CEO of the College of Medical Radiation Technologists. And it's a pleasure to be talking to you today. We have a lot of people signed up for the webinar, and of course it will be available on our website following, so people can watch it at their convenience. So welcome to all the MRTs and sonographers who are on the line. We're glad that you're here. And this is really a terrific way to reach a lot of people and to provide you with the most up-to-date information. And so today's topic is what happens on January 1st, 2019. We've been talking about it, and it's only 3 months away now. And it's not going to be the end of the world. So, you know, it's going to be the regulation of sonographers. So we will talk about what happens, what changes, your questions, and then we're going to talk about some updates on the status of applications and registration. So we'll get started, and you'll remember that the reason that this is all happening is because in the past there has been an inconsistent regulatory framework for health professionals who are working in medical radiation and imaging departments. So, you know, in this image here, we've got radiologists, nurses, MRTs, sonographers, cardiologists, all these different regulated professions. And the only one that has not been regulated is sonography. And of course, we know sonography is the most operator dependent of all the imaging modalities. And also you do some pretty invasive procedures. So it really has been a gap in the public protection framework. And the role of the College of Medical Radiation Technologists is to protect the public. And we do that by making sure that MRTs and now sonographers are registered to practice and they're practicing professionally. The government gave us direction back in August of 2017 to start to regulate sonographers with CMRTO as a fifth specialty. So we immediately put out a news release. We got the letter on the 2nd, and we put out the news release on the 3rd, and we started to work very hard to meet all the deadlines. And the biggest deadline, of course, is to make sure everybody, all sonographers, are registered and legally authorized to practice as of the end of 2018. It needed 3 regulations for us to be able to regulate sonographers, and they were approved by Cabinet, and they were filed on December 20th. And so the first one is the registration regulation that's made under the Medical Radiation Technology Act, and that came into force on January 1, 2017, and it gave CMRTO the legal authority to regulate sonography as a fifth specialty. They also approved the prescribed forms of energy under the scope of practice under the Medical Radiation Technology Act. So now there's a piece of, there's a regulation that prescribes sound waves for diagnostic ultrasound as one of our forms of energy under our scope of practice. So that happened, and that came into effect on January 1 as well. And then the third one that comes into effect on January 1, 2018, and this is where things are changing, is the Controlled Acts regulation under the Regulated Health Professions Act. And that defines who can apply and who can order sound waves for diagnostic ultrasound. So that's the big piece that's changing on January 1. As you know, CMRTO, we're the regulatory body for MRTs and sonographers in Ontario. We're not the association, we're not a certification body, we purely are a regulatory body. And we have 2 pieces of legislation that gives us the authority to do that. The Regulated Health Professions Act, which is the Ontario legislation that governs the regulation of 26 health professions, of which ours is one, and the Medical Radiation Technology Act, which is our profession-specific legislation under the Regulated Health Professions Act. So the important thing to know is that we are grounded in legislation. It's everything we do is in accordance with the legislation. And our job is to protect the public by making sure that MRTs and sonographers are qualified to practice and that they're practicing professionally. And there's three ways we do that. The first way is through registration. So we register only those individuals who've met all the requirements set out in the regulation. And that's why our registration regulation is so important. It is the first hurdle to protect the public. We're only going to let those individuals who are qualified to practice to come into the profession and be legally authorized to practice the profession. The second way we do it is through continued competence. So all CMRTO members are required to complete our continued competence program or our quality assurance program every year throughout their entire career. As long as they're a member of CMRTO, they have to demonstrate that they're maintaining their competence by completing the CMRTO QA program. And then the third way is through the enforcement of standards. So the college sets the standards of practice of the profession. And then we have a process that's set out in the Regulated Health Professions Act to receive complaints from members of the public and also to review those complaints. And we have sanctions, or we have processes and sanctions to deal with those members who fail to adhere to the professional standards and the professional misconduct regulation. So that's the enforcement piece. So what's happening in 2018? Well, it's our year of transition. So on January 1st of this year, we got the legal authority to regulate sonographers under the registration regulation. And then sonographers were able to apply and become registered with CMRTO. But it's not yet mandatory. So we've got this 1 year to get everybody in. And our 1 year grandparenting period began. So that's an important component. And then starting on January 1, 2019, sonographers must be registered with CMRTO in the specialty of diagnostic medical sonography to be legally authorized to practice in Ontario. What that means is, come January 1, if you're not registered, you can't work. And we can't make it any more plain than that. And so what we're talking about today is how to make sure that everybody meets that requirement. Also, the grandparenting period ends. And so even if you're not going to be practicing on January 1, 2019, if you're going to be relying on the grandparenting provision to become registered at some point in the future, then you want to make sure you get your application in before December 31st, because that's when the grandparenting provision in the registration regulation expires. And as of that time, all applicants must complete an approved program and an approved examination in order to be registered and able to practice. So those are the two key things that we're concerned about come the end of this year. So on January 1, the regulation of sonographers is going to be fully implemented. And so you have to be registered with us in order to be legally authorized to practice the profession. And that includes using the protected title, all those things. And also, under the Controlled Acts regulation, you have to be registered with CMRTO in order to be legally authorized to apply sound waves for diagnostic ultrasound in Ontario. So those are the two key components. The grandparenting provision runs out as of the end of this year, and the grandparenting permits individuals who are currently practicing in sonography to apply for registration in the specialty, even if they haven't completed an educational program or an examination. So when a profession is first being regulated, there's always those individuals who established the profession, they were early adapters of the technology, and they may not have taken a program because there wasn't a program available, or in fact, they might have written the programs. Also, there was no requirement for practitioners to have to take a program up to this point. So you can apply something retroactively. So we've got this 1 year of grandparenting to allow those individuals who are currently competently practicing the profession to become registered and able to continue on. And so the public is protected because by coming into the college, even if you haven't completed an approved program and an approved examination, by coming into the college, then you have to meet the standards of practice of the profession. And so everybody has to meet the same standards, and that's how the public is protected. We also, of course, have our complaints and discipline process and our continued competence requirements. So what we're looking for the grandparenting period, the applicant must provide satisfactory evidence of competent practice in an area of practice of diagnostic medical sonography, and they must have been engaged in practice in Canada within the scope of practice of the profession on December 31st, 2017. So if you're practicing or working that day, then you're going to meet that requirement. If you weren't practicing on December 31st, then provided you did work for at least 400 hours in 2017, that's okay. Or if you were on a leave, an extended leave or a maternity leave, for at least 1,200 hours in the prior 3 years. So that's what we're looking for in the grandparenting. And there's been lots of information about that. But the important thing is, if you're going to be requiring or relying on that to get your application in, no later than December 31st. So after that time, the grandparenting period ends and all applicants must complete the mandatory registration requirements that are set out in the regulation. So everyone must have completed an approved program in the specialty or a program considered to be equivalent by council. So there's the list of approved programs in Ontario that we're looking for. So on a go-forward basis, it's going to be just the way it has been for medical radiation technologists for the last 25 years, that you must have completed an approved educational program. And then also, you must have completed one or more of the examinations approved by council. And effective January 1, there will only be the one examination, the Sonography Canada examination. During this transition year, council has approved the ARDMS examination as an approved examination, but that ends at the end of this year. And starting on January 1, only those individuals who have completed the Sonography Canada examination will be able to be registered with CMRTO. You also must have engaged in clinical practice or completed the approved program within the last 5 years. So that is the same for MRTs. And you must complete all those requirements in the same area of practice within the specialty of diagnostic medical sonography. And we know that at DMS, you have 3 areas of practice: general, cardiac, or vascular sonography. So what that means is if you do an approved program in cardiac, then you need to do the Sonography Canada exam in cardiac, and that will be your area of practice when you become registered. In 2019, we're going to have the first election for a council member in the specialty of diagnostic medical sonography. So up to this point, when we first got our direction to regulate sonographers with CMRTO, our council invited both Sonography Canada and the Ontario Association of Medical Radiation Sciences to nominate 2 sonographers to sit on our council. And so Carolyn Trottier and Ray Lapalainen are the 2 individuals who have been very busy over the last 18 months, coming to all the council meetings. And during the transition period, they've been using their knowledge, skill, and judgment as a member of the profession to regulate in the public interest. So they've had a lot of important insight as our council has been developing the standards, the guidelines, all those other pieces that are going to be affecting or setting the standards for you as sonographers working in the profession. But in 2019, they will no longer be transitional council members, and we will have an election. So you'll start to see that. Council approved a bylaw just last week, and the bylaw states that sonography has its own district, and at the end of this year, we'll be looking for nominations for members to run for election to council. So that's another important thing that's going to be happening in 2019. Another huge thing that's going to be happening, maybe, is that the Medical Radiation and Imaging Technology Act comes into force. So the plan is that the new act will repeal and replace the existing Medical Radiation Technology Act. The new act, the MRIG Act, has received royal assent, and so now we're just waiting for the government to proclaim it in force. And everything has been geared for it to come into force on January 1. But of course, now we have to wait for the new government to go through its processes in order to be able to proclaim it in force. So we're hoping that this will happen, and certainly our council has been busy preparing for it. It's important because it updates the name of the profession and the college to reflect all of the membership. So for sonographers, this is an important piece because for many years, sonographers didn't feel part of the medical radiation technology community because you don't use radiation. And so it was an important piece to get the name of the act changed to include imaging. And so that will appropriately identify all 5 specialties of the college as we move forward. And then we'll be changing our name. So everything has to change. We have a new logo that council approved at their meeting in June. And so we're now preparing with a new website, with new publications, all those things. So hopefully on January 1, when the MRIG Act does come into force, we'll be in a position that we'll be able to release our new website and our new logo. But it really still is the same college with the same membership. It's just that we now have sonographers too. So it's kind of an evolution rather than a revolution. We're more inclusive. We have all the imaging and medical radiation specialties included in the one college from this point on. So we will keep you posted on email and social media for updates. So keep an eye on all that stuff, and we'll keep our fingers crossed that the government is able to proclaim it in force for January 1. So January 1, all sonographers must be registered with CMRTO. And so what does that mean to you as a regulated professional? Well, it means that now you're responsible. You have accountabilities to your college and also to your patients. And the first thing you have to do is maintain your registration with the college. And that means renewing your registration annually. Our fees are due on our birthday. You have to meet and maintain the standards of practice of the profession and the practice guidelines. and all the other pieces of legislation that affect our practice, like consent and all those other pieces that you do every day in your practice, but perhaps don't realize the legal obligations. And so now becomes a legal obligation for you to do all those things. You have to practice only in those areas in which you have the education and experience, and also the knowledge, skill, and judgment to practice safely. So as a self-regulated professional, you're going to have a certificate of registration in the specialty of diagnostic medical sonography. Your education and experience is going to be in a particular area of diagnostic medical sonography. So you only practice in those areas in which you have the education and experience and the knowledge, skill, and judgment to practice safely. If you need to learn about a new procedure or a new technique, then you can do that. And then once you're comfortable that you are able to practice safely in that area, then that becomes part of your ongoing practice. You have to complete the QA program every year, adhere to the code of ethics, you have to maintain PLI in accordance with our bylaws, and then you can participate in the self-regulation of your profession by electing your peers to council, commenting on consultations, applying to be appointed to the committee. There's lots of work for the profession to do in order to make sure that we are regulating effectively in the public interest. So you're going to be required to have professional liability insurance. CMRTO does not provide PLI, and the reason for that is because our job is to protect the public, and PLI is to protect you as professionals. So we have the requirement for members to have PLI, but you can get that from the association. So from the OAMRS, the CMRT, Sonography Canada. Also, your employer or union may have PLI for you, and we have information on our website about it. On the right of this screen, you can see the what you must know about professional liability insurance. And we have a whole series of publications called What You Must Know About that talks about specific areas within the college that our members need to know. So you can have a look at those on the website. And then you have obligations as regulated health professionals to keep up to date. And the easiest way to keep up to date is to read your email from the college. So first of all, make sure the emails from the college are not going into your junk email and that you actually see them. They come into your inbox, because we have a requirement that all our members need to have an email address that they provided to the college and that they check on a regular basis. So this is how we communicate with you. We don't communicate through paper anymore. It's all electronic. And we only tell you things that you need to know about your practice or changes in legislation. So it's important that you read your email. And then, of course, we have our social media, and you can watch our webinars live as you are now, or later on YouTube. So that's kind of the first part of the presentation, and now we're going to get to questions that sonographers have had as they've been calling into the college related to their applications. So first is, who should apply for registration as a sonographer? And this is a very common question, and it will be, you know, I'm a cardiac technologist, do I need to apply? Well, yes, any individual who will be applying sound waves for diagnostic ultrasound for the delivery of healthcare services in Ontario on January 1st, 2019, and after that, needs to be a member of CMRTO or CPSO, which is the College of Physicians and Surgeons of Ontario, the College of Nurses of Ontario, or the College of Midwives. So if you're not a member of CPSO, CNO, or CMO, then you need to be a member of CMRTO in order to be able to practice as a sonographer on that date. And of course, that includes all three areas of practice of general, vascular, and cardiac. So we have the condition of registration on the registration regulation, and this appears on the public register. And it says the member shall practice only in the areas in which the member is educated and experienced. And so we're issuing one specialty certificate for diagnostic medical sonography, and then general, cardiac, and vascular are each being considered an area of practice within that. But that's not appearing on the public register. That's up to you and your employer to make sure that you have the education and experience to be able to practice competently in the areas in which you are working, okay? Another common question, I'm already registered with CMRTO in another specialty, should I add sonography? Well, if you're eligible, yes. And especially if you're going to be relying on the grandparenting provision to add the specialty to your certificate of registration. So you can submit an application and a one-time application fee of $113, and then you can add sonography to your certificate of registration. So then you could have two specialties, and here on our slide we have a member who is registered both in radiography and also sonography. So there's our abbreviated titles for all 5 specialties, and for sonographers you can use MRT bracket DMS, or you can just use DMS on its own, so you don't need to use the MRT. And then, of course, for the other 4 specialties that we have had in the college for many years now, there's the abbreviated titles for them. So if you add a specialty, the good news is there's only one annual registration fee. So you pay the one fee and you can have multiple specialties provided you meet the registration requirements for those specialties. So kind of 2-for-1 price, so that's good. So another question is, I'm not performing procedures on patients, should I register? Well, the practice of the profession is broader than the delivery of clinical services. It can include education, management, research, and administration. So if you're going to use the protected title, or if your employer requires you to be registered, or you're going to be relying on the grandparenting provision, then you should become registered in 2018. And on your application, you'll see that there's a non-clinical practice form. So you just need to complete that in place of the clinical or the competence verification form. How will my employer know that I'm registered? Well, as soon as you become registered, your name and information which is available to the public goes on the public register of members that's on our website. And so what we have here is Annette Hornby's public register entry. And Annette is our Director of Quality Assurance here at CMRTO. And she's registered in 2 specialties, radiography and diagnostic medical sonography. So you can see there that we have her business place of practice, her name, her specialty, that she's currently an active member. And if you scroll down the public register, it also shows detailed registration history, if you have registrations in other jurisdictions, the term, condition, and limitation of practicing only in the areas in which the member is educated and experienced. And then we have referrals, special notices, and findings. And of course, Annette doesn't have any discipline findings against her, but this would be where they would show up. Now, people are saying the practice of medical radiation technology. Should the Medical Radiation and Imaging Technology Act come into effect, then the name of the profession will change. And so although it says medical radiation technology, of course that includes diagnostic medical sonography. Okay? Will other health professionals be required to register with CMRTO in order to perform ultrasound examinations? Well, no, they won't. The government determines which health professionals are able to apply sound waves for diagnostic ultrasound, and that's done through the Regulated Health Professions Act Controlled Act regulation. So members of CMRTO, CPSOs, midwives, and nurses will be authorized to apply sound waves. And that's because we regulate sonographers, not the use of the technology. That is governed by the government. What are the fees? So we have our one-time application fee of $113 for each of the 5 specialties. So obviously, if you're applying only in one specialty, in diagnostic medical sonography, then it's one application fee. The registration fee is paid every year and is due on your birthday. It's the same amount no matter how many specialties you are registered in. And at the time of registration, it's prorated from the month that you become registered to the month of your birthday. And so we'll talk about that in a couple of slides in the future. The fees are set by council in the bylaw, and they're reviewed by council each year. And so another question is, why is it so expensive? Well, these fees are used for the college to meet its regulatory obligations of registering, setting standards of practice, having a complaints and discipline process, and a quality assurance process. Self-regulation is self-funded. And so we asked for funding from the government to set up sonography, and we were told no. And so our council determined that it was so important to regulate sonographers that they would use our modest reserves to cost or to establish the regulation of sonographers. And of course, all this work has been going on over 2 years now before we're really getting the benefit of the additional revenue from our new members in sonography. So we've been using MRT funds to be able to do this. And the money has gone towards staffing, software, infrastructure, and those reserves are going to need to be replenished over the next couple of years. And the full costs of regulation are still not known. We're getting a much better idea. And of course, we still don't know the full amount of revenue. So we need a year of stable funding, stable revenue, and expenses to really understand the impact. So we don't know yet if there's going to be any impact on CMRTO fees, either positive or negative in the future. So another big question, how do I apply? Well, all this is on our website. We have an application guide and DMS regulation information and FAQs that went up on January 1 of this year. We did a webinar on March 22nd, so all that information is there. We're not going to spend any time going through it today because we've covered it already. But what we do want to focus on is some of the more common questions. So people ask, why do I have to complete the jurisprudence course? And so that's a registration requirement that all members need to be aware of the legislative framework under which they're practicing in the province. So this course is available on our website. It has 7 modules, and you can see there what it covers. So consent, confidentiality and privacy, orders, quality assurance. So more than just the legislation. And it also provides you with information about what you need to know in order to practice safely in the province. And so this is important. You're going to be required to meet those legislation pieces, and you need to understand it. It's free, and you need to complete it before you submit your application. So then another question is, what happens after I submit my application? Well, we start to review your application. And your application, if it meets all the requirements, then you're going to be approved and you'll be notified by email. If not, if we need more information or your application needs to be reviewed by the registration committee, again, you'll be notified by email. And you can always check the status of your application through the member and applicant portal. And here's our team who's doing a tremendous amount of work. They are really dedicated, enthusiastic, and they take their work very seriously to process these applications accurately and quickly. And so there's 8 of them. We used to have 2 people taking care of registration. We now have 8 in order to be able to process the huge number that we're getting in 2018. So, and here's Nolene. She's the coordinator of registration. So we start by checking the applications for completeness and accuracy. And I'm sorry to say about 80% of the applications are incomplete, or people have missed checking boxes or missed signatures or missed dates. So please make sure that your application is totally complete before you submit it, because it just slows down the process when we have to contact you by email and get you to send the information in again. So that's what they will do. If it's incomplete, they'll contact you. They rename and organize the scanned documents because the documents are coming in all different formats. And then once all that is complete, it goes to the professional conduct team for review. Then it goes to me for review, and myself and Caroline and Tina Langlois, we're reviewing to make sure that the application meets all the requirements set out in the regulation. And then if you're approved, then we notify you of that approval by email, and that goes out to you right away. And here's our registration team. They've been working, they're exhausted. They've been working all kinds of extra overtime, weekends, after hours to get through these applications. And the good news is they've reviewed and approved 1,000, so almost 2,000 applications, which is terrific. So you guys have been great at getting your applications in early on in the process so that we've been able to review them, which is terrific. There's another close to 1,000 applications currently under review, and there's still 700 waiting for review. So it takes time to go through these. So that's where we are with numbers. And so it's important to get your application as soon as possible, because there's another 2,000 people ahead of you in the queue, and we need to make sure we can get through everybody before the year end. So here's our numbers. And so back in June, on the top left there is our active members by primary specialty. And at the time, we had 109 members in the specialty of diagnostic medical sonography. And as of today, Nolene ran the numbers for us this morning. We have almost 600 sonographers registered and another 1,300 approved for registration. So that's our close to 2,000 sonographers either registered or approved. And there you can see that image there. Those were our first 3 DMS certificates of registration that were issued to Ray and Carolyn and Annette at the council meeting in March of this year. So what do you need to do? If you haven't got your application in, get it in now. No more waiting around. We're now, next week is the beginning of October. We're into the last 3 months of the year. And once you get your application in and it's approved, you don't have to register right away. The important thing is getting it in. And so once you do have approval, though, we are recommending that you complete the registration process no later than the first week of December. Because come January 1, you must be registered in order to be able to practice. And employers are watching. They're not going to be scheduling individuals who are not registered, because they have an obligation too to only hire and employ individuals who are registered with the appropriate regulatory body. So this is a big change for sonographers. MRTs have been doing this for 25 years, but come January 1, if you're not registered, then your employer can't schedule you to work in diagnostic medical sonography. So the last thing to do is to pay the registration fee once you get the approval. And so because it is prorated by month to your birthday, we have a little tool on our website that we give you a link to when you get your approval. And you can put in which month is your birthday and which months you want to be registered, and it tells you how much your fee is. So although the annual fee is a total of $531, that's for the whole year, in this example, the applicant's birthday is in June. They're going to become registered in November, and so their payment for the 7 months is $309.80. So that's how that will work, okay? So important to pay your fee, and certainly no later than the first week of December. And then what you'll need to do is show your employer your name on the public register. So you'll be able to do that, and you'll be able to join your sonography colleagues in having your certificate of registration available on the public register. And it's important to do it in December. Don't leave it to January 1. Don't leave it till the end of December. You don't save any money, and you're going to risk not being able to process it come December 31st. That'll be the time there'll be an ice storm, power will go out, whatever, and you know Murphy's rules sometimes. So give yourself lots of time and don't stress it. Do it at the beginning. And then come January 1, 2019, you'll be able to start practicing as a regulated health professional, and long overdue. We've had so many sonographers say, you know what, this is a good thing because it recognizes the profession and also it protects the public. So we're thrilled at CMRTO to have sonographers join us as the 5th specialty. Our council is thrilled to have their sonography colleagues around the table. And we have sonographers already on our statutory committees. So you're very much, as a profession, very much engaged and included, and setting your standards already for your profession and your colleagues. So that's the end of this presentation today. We have another one next week, and Janet Maggio, our manager of QA, is collecting myths, rumors, and urban legends. So some of the questions that have been coming in to our registration team, we're going to talk about that. If you have any questions that we didn't cover today, that you still have concerns about, then email the CMRTO, and Janet will collect them all, and hopefully we'll be able to deal with most of them next week. So I will see you next Thursday on October 4th. And thank you all so much for your attention, and have a great day. We'll see you next week.